because it may take more than one night to find the way out. If it does, whoever is doing the exploring must be back in his cage by morning. Otherwise, Dr. Schultz will find out. Jenner was right. It took us about a week. What we did after some discussion was to find some equipment. So first, a large spool of thread in one of the cabinets where some of us had seen Julie place it one day. Second, a screwdriver that was kept on a shelf near the electric equipment, because as Jenner pointed out, there would probably be a screen over the end of the air shaft to keep out debris, and we might have to pry it loose. What we really needed was a light, for the ducts at night were completely dark. But there was none to be had, not even a box of matches. The thread and screwdriver we hid in the duct a few feet from the entrance. We could only hope they would not be missed, or that if they were, they would not be suspected. Justin and two others were chosen as the exploration party. One of the others was Arthur, whom you've met. They had a terrible time at first. Here was a maze to end all mazes, and in the dark they quickly lost their sense of direction. Still, they kept at it, night after night, exploring the network of shafts that laced like cubical spiderweb through the walls and ceilings of the building. They would tie the end of their thread to the grid in our laboratory and unroll it from the spool as they went. Time and time again, they reached the end of the thread and had to come back. "It just isn't long enough," Justin would complain. "Every time I come to the end, I think if I could just go 10 feet farther." And finally, that's what they did. On the 7th night, just as the thread ran out, he and the other two reached a shaft that was wider than any they had found before, and it seemed, as they walked along it, to be slanting gently upward. But the spool was empty. "You wait here," Justin said to the others. "I'm going just a little way farther. Hang on to the spool, and if I call back." They had tied the end of the thread around the spool so they would not lose it in the dark. Justin had a hunch. The air coming through the shaft had a fresher smell than where they were, and seemed to be blowing harder than in the other shafts. Up ahead, he thought he could hear the whir of the machine running quietly, and there was a faint vibration in the metal under his feet. He went on. The shaft turned upward at a sharp angle, and then, straight ahead, he saw it, a patch of lighter colored darkness than the pitch black around him, and in the middle of it, 3 stars twinkling. It was the open sky. Across the opening, there was, as Jenner predicted, a coarse screen of heavy wire. He ran towards it for a few seconds longer and then stopped. The sound of the machine had grown suddenly louder, changing from a whir to a roar. It had obviously shifted speed. An automatic switch somewhere in the building had turned it from low to high, and the air blowing past Justin came on so hard it made him gasp. He braced his feet against the metal and held on. In a minute, as suddenly as it had roared, the machine returned to a whisper. He looked around and realized he was lucky to have stopped. By the dim light from the sky, he could see that he had reached the point where perhaps 24 air shafts came together like branches into a trunk of a tree. If he had gone a few steps farther, he would have never been able to distinguish which shaft was his. He turned in his tracks, and in a few minutes he rejoined his friends. We had a meeting that night, and Justin told us all of what he had found. He had left the thread anchored by the screwdriver to guide us out. Some were for leaving immediately, but it was late, and Jenner and I argued against it. We did not know how long it would take us to break through the screen at the end. If it should take more than an hour or two, daylight would be upon us. We would be unable to risk returning to the laboratory and would have to spend the day in the shaft, or try to get away in broad daylight. Dr. Schultz might even find out how we had gone and trap us in the air shaft. Finally, reluctantly, everyone agreed to spend one more day in the laboratory and leave early the next night. But it was a hard decision, with freedom so near and everyone thinking as I did. Suppose Dr. Schultz grew suspicious and put locks on our cages. Suppose someone found our thread and pulled it out. This was unlikely. The near end tied to the spool was 6 feet up in the shaft, well hidden. Just the same, we were uneasy. Then, just as we were ending our meeting, a new complication arose. We had been standing in a rough circle on the floor of the laboratory, just outside 2 screen doors that enclosed the mice cages. Now from the inside cabinet came a voice. "Nicodemus." It was a clear but plaintive call, the voice of a mouse. We had almost forgotten the mice were there.